Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. I am joined by the journalist and I guess co-creator of Status Coup, Jordan Chariton. Jordan, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm good, Graham. A little tired, but I'm delighted to be on your vegan paradise.
Welcome to Graham's vegan paradise. As much as I would like to talk more vegan smoothie recipes with you, Jordan, which I'm sure you were excited. That's the main reason you wanted to come on the show. But we wanted to bring you on the show because you have been covering the Flint water crisis really since it began. And some pretty big news rolled out yesterday that you covered. You pushed that out on Status Coup. And I know it's probably why you've been so busy. But so why don't you just tell our audience what happened yesterday and what it means in the totality of this water crisis that's been happening?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we broke, my partner Jen and I broke a massive story with The Intercept. And essentially what we showed is the cover-up. We showed the real-time cover-up of the Flint water crisis that Governor Rick Snyder was actually involved with directly. And at the same time we broke that, the sitting attorney general leaked the charges against Rick Snyder, which was just described to me by a Flint resident as a parking ticket for poisoning people. He got a misdemeanor willful neglect, which is up potentially, if convicted, a year in prison and $1,000 fine. He's a millionaire, by the way. So what Jen and I broke with The Intercept, and I've been working on this for over a year, this information that we broke was, so there was 2 investigations in Flint. Think about it this way. Robert Mueller with Russiagate, he was a special prosecutor. Originally in 2016, there was a special prosecutor hired for Flint, not Robert Mueller, but you get the point, a special prosecutor. And he was separate from the Michigan Attorney General. Just
to clarify, he was hired by the feds or by the state of Michigan?
State of Michigan.
Okay.
So that the state wouldn't be investigating itself, basically. So they hired an independent counsel. His investigation was for 3 years. And in 2019, the new Attorney General, a Democrat, cleaned house. She fired the special prosecutor and his whole team who had been investigating for 3 years. So our report is on what the original investigators found. And what we found was the original investigators, they found an avalanche of phone calls, through search warrants, with Governor Snyder, his chief of staff, and the head of the health department. The head of the health department and the chief of staff were on the phone 9 times in 2 days in the middle of October 2014, when the Legionella outbreak, which killed, PBS reports, possibly 115 people, when Legionella was basically, alarm bells were going off in Snyder's environmental department and Snyder's health department. The governor was on the phone with his chief of staff. The chief of staff was on the phone with the health department. So we got this sequence of calls. And in 9 of those phone calls, Graham, where the chief of staff is on the phone with the Department of Health's director, right when they hang up, chief of staff right away calls the governor. That's what we call a cutout, a middleman. So the chief of staff called the governor right after getting off the phone with the health director. They also found that the chief of staff was calling a hospital association with ties to the very hospital that had the Legionella outbreak. So why
just give people a timeline, just so October of 14, when the Legionella came out, this is basically when the Flint water crisis first kind of started, right?
Yeah, they switched the water to the Flint River, which for those of you that don't know, think about like the Hudson River in New York, or I don't know what you got in LA, but I mean, this is where they pollute. Industrial waste is dumped in the Flint River. General Motors dumped in the Flint River for a century. This is not where you want your drinking water from. So they switched in April 2014. The reason they switched is a whole nother story. It was a privatization scheme. But putting that aside, 6 months after, you got residents have rashes already. They're showing up to City Hall with brown water jugs. The water stinks. And the city and the state are telling them, oh, no, it's all right. You could drink it. But there was a Legionella outbreak, and Legionella can kill you. It's a deadly waterborne disease. It's a bacterial disease, and it's like a pneumonia, a bacterial pneumonia. So the Snyder's environmental department was aware that there was a huge increase in Legionella in the Flint area. His health department was aware. His whole argument, by the way, in front of Congress, he testified under oath in front of Congress, was essentially, yeah, nobody told me. I'm the governor. Nobody told me. But he said he found out about it in January 2016 and held a press conference the next day. Our evidence and the original investigation found he knew about it in October 2014. It just so happened, Graham, it was a few weeks before his governor's reelection.
Oh, what weird that couldn't come out right before an election. That's odd.
It was also reports where he was angling. This was before Trump ran down the escalator and, hijacked everybody's brains. He was angling to run for president in 2016 before Trump announced. So October 2014, he's on the phone with his chief of staff. He's on the phone with his the health director. It's all laid out in the story. Then 5 days after that, they found a briefing. It was titled Governor's Briefings, plural, that it mentions Legionella in writing that was addressed to the governor. So bottom line, there's all these phone calls. There's an in-writing briefing. There's other evidence that's in the story that his environmental director knew about it. The environmental director reports to the governor. So what we broke was that the original investigation team, who was fired basically by the new attorney general, who's a Democrat, they were gunning for involuntary manslaughter against Governor Snyder, which would have been at a minimum 15-year felony. They also found definitive evidence for misconduct in office, felony, with the misdemeanor neglect of duty charge. But the main thing was they were about 80% away, 80% there to charge him with involuntary manslaughter before they were fired by the new attorney general. And the new attorney general announced today charges against 9 people, including Governor Snyder. She claims she was not involved with the investigation. She recused herself and left it to others. But after the original investigation, which I broke, was going for involuntary manslaughter, they announced willful neglect of duty, which is a misdemeanor. And importantly, Graham, they charged Governor Snyder's top advisor, who in Flint in state government was known kind of as his henchman, his right-hand man, his fixer. They charged him with extortion, perjury, obstruction of justice, and misconduct in office. So the question is, how is the governor's top advisor and right-hand man going around extorting people, obstructing justice, and doing all these things without the governor knowing? So it's, and one has to wonder, Graham, why do you think they announced this while the president was being impeached in the aftermath of a Capitol attack? It doesn't seem like if you want attention on something, this would be the prime time to do it.
I mean, yeah, of course, this is what they do. Then when they're doing something horrible, there's always some big distraction. And not that what happened at the Capitol is some sort of small thing that they're blowing out of proportion. It is a significant thing. But of course, it will be used for stuff like this. This is just like, and of course, it's the Democrats are at the root of this. And, they're supposed to be the big heroes and, the Republicans are so evil. But look what the Democrats have done here. So, I mean, I guess my question is, and I don't, I'm not a lawyer, but, and I know you're not as well, but what is from a legal standpoint, can anything be done with the information that was gathered during the initial investigation? I mean,
well, first of all, I think it's important to say, I know for a fact that the current investigation that charged the governor with a misdemeanor has all of the information I reported. So they have it. They know about these phone calls. These phone calls were basically a smoking gun. I mean, they're not on the phone, bang, 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 for 2 days talking about the weather. They have this briefing that was addressed, governor's briefings that mentioned Legionella. So they have it. It kind of is dumbfounding how one set of investigators, who, by the way, it was a registered Republican, was the special prosecutor, how one set of investigators could see misconduct in office, neglect of duty, and were moving towards involuntary manslaughter. But this one says The only thing they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt is neglect of duty. To be fair to the current investigation that announced it today, they legally said they cannot disclose what their evidence is because that would come through the legal process, discovery and then going to trial. They will release the evidence. But they have this evidence because I know for a fact some of the people on the current investigation were with the first investigation. So it's really mind-boggling. I mean, as somebody who's covered this, you don't need to be a lawyer to know the governor of Michigan cannot not know what his top environmental officials know who report to him, what his top health officials know who report to him. This just not possible. He also, I mean, for Vice, so before this Intercept story, Jen and I broke a story for Vice. His right-hand man, if you think of the Sopranos or whatever, the mafia, his consigliere, like his guy, his fixer, was going around Flint offering payoffs to sick residents. Like sick residents would go ballistic at town halls. They would get media attention. And all of a sudden, the governor's right-hand man is in their living room offering to pay for their medical treatment, but you can't tell anyone the state's paying for it. That's called a payoff. That's called a bribe. The residents I spoke with said, yeah, he said, I'm going to talk to the governor about this when I get back. These deals. So, I've spoken with a lot of people today on camera and quite a few off. And, they think politics is involved here. For whatever reason, they didn't want to go for the king. And it really, I don't know why the Democratic Attorney General, she never really explained in depth why she fired these. Like this would be the equivalent of Robert Mueller doing a 2-year investigation and like Joe Biden coming in and just firing him and just let's redo the investigation. Like MSNBC would go ballistic, right? Yeah. Yeah. She just said her excuse was there was deficiencies in the investigation. They didn't get all the evidence. They did, sloppiness. Well, stay tuned because there's a part 2. There's a big reason why they couldn't get some of the evidence. There was an unprecedented guerrilla war where Snyder and his lawyers wouldn't give them the briefings, wouldn't give them the emails, wouldn't give them the documents. And the attorney general over this special prosecutor was a Republican who was enabling Snyder to not do that because the Republican attorney general was running as governor to replace Snyder. So obviously the Republican attorney general, if you're going to charge the sitting Republican governor, it might not help your chances to win the Republican nomination for governor, to win the governor. So this is there's so many layers to this corruption. But the bottom line is, if you are a governor, if you are a senator, if you are a congressman, but particularly a governor, particularly a mayor, an executive, and you can basically say there was a failure at all levels and there was a bureaucracy and nobody brought it to me. And you could get away with that. You could get away with saying, nobody told me. Nobody brought it to my level. Then that's not a good sign for your neighborhood. Because if governors and mayors and executives can get away with saying, yeah, this thing that was right underneath me, nobody brought it to my attention, it's going to happen. It is happening. It's happening in a lot of places, whether it's water, whether it's mining, whether it's fracking, you name it. But our story with The Intercept, I think, to the common sense, objective person shows this governor, his chief of staff, his health director were on the phone like a bunch of drunken teenagers for 2 days, scrambling while the topic of Legionella, there were emails from from health epidemiologists saying, the source of the outbreak is the Flint River. There were the governor's environmental advisor 2 days before these phone calls sent an email to his chief of staff, to Snyder's chief of staff, pleading for Flint to be switched back to Detroit. So right now, October 2014, there's still time to save lives. If you stop it then, if you switch it back to Flint, sure, it's going to be a lot of egg on Snyder's face for allowing it in the first place, but you could save lives. They allowed Flint to stay on that water for another year after that. Children, I've sat on porches, Graham. Children forget the alphabet. children can't count to 10. I've met people, when I met them 5 years ago, they were 35, looked somewhat healthy. They're dead now. I've met people that are in kidney failure. I've met people that now have Parkinson's. I've met people that have thyroid cancer, not like 75, 80. I'm talking 30, 40, 50, no family history. So it's a disgrace, because this is also a failure of the media. I mean, I'm not from Flint. I'm not even from Michigan, and I've been there 17 times. Not because like I'm so special, but because as a journalist, you should just give a damn if people are poisoned and left to die by their government. And I think I think a lot of Flint residents, I've spoken with them, are wondering today, how does a governor who presided over this get charged with a misdemeanor?
Well, yeah, the crime is, I mean, it's on so many levels. As far as the media concerned, that was the thing, was like, how come you were the only one going there? I mean, literally, they went there initially and then left. I mean, like I mean, I remember doing the first time I was on Aggressive Progressives 4 years ago, 2017. You were still reporting for TYT, and I mean, like you've been covering this, and nobody else. And then and even the way they release this news of that he's being charged, they just say Snyder charged, and they make it seem like, oh, they finally got him. And then if you got to thumb through the corporate media to go, oh my God, he got an after school detention. Like, that's it. That's all he got, was nothing. And of course, I mean, this is again another, if you want to pull it back wider, it's just more reason why this horrible two-party duopoly, never anywhere in there, from these filthy Republicans to these disgusting Democrats, is anyone thinking, hey, what's best for the people of Flint? This ain't right. We got to save lives. It's, I might look bad for my next election. And, the new regime comes in. And what's mind boggling is, so Snyder was a Republican, correct? And he was replaced by a Democrat, correct?
Yep.
So you would think the Democrats would want to come in and fry him and say, see, I'm the savior. I fixed everything. So those awful Republicans, just from a purely, help your own statistics, not even if you didn't care about human beings, just if you're just a heartless politician, which you probably are if you're in either one of those parties. So, but even just from a this is good PR, this will help me get reelected standpoint, you would think the Democrat would come in and go, Snyder, we're going to fry that asshole and put him in jail. What do you think? Why do you think the Democrats would clean house on the attorney general, and then basically, from what you're saying, have completely sort of swept the initial investigation under the rug, the one that was charging Snyder with manslaughter?
Well, first of all, I don't want to get so in the weeds that people get confused, but it's actually worse than sweeping it under the rug. So the current attorney general, who's no fan of mine, that's fine. She's a Democrat. And while she was a candidate for attorney general, so the original investigation was still going on, she had not won yet. While she was a candidate, she was literally publicly shitting on the investigation. So I've spoken with legal people. That's just unheard of. She hadn't seen one piece of evidence. She hadn't seen one document. I mean, legally, how are you commenting on their investigation if you don't have any access to it? As a lawyer, you're running to be attorney general. You are commenting on an investigation that you would be overtaking, that you don't know anything about, really. You only know something. You don't only know what the charges you see, but you don't know the evidence they have. And I know for a fact, based on sources, the original investigation had defendants cooperating with them at that time to move up the totem pole. They were working it like an old school mob case. Start with the low people, move it up to the mob boss. Those defendants, they quieted up. They saw this attorney general shitting on the investigation, and they rolled the dice. All right, well, if she's up in the polls, she's going to win. She's probably going to fire them. And that's exactly what happened. So not only I don't want to say obstruct, because I legally, I don't know if that's what happened, but she basically sabotaged this investigation. Why did she do it? I could only speculate, but, at the end of the day, the special prosecutor was a Republican. The attorney general was a Republican that was overseeing this. So maybe it is that they didn't want the overall credit to go to her predecessor, who was a Republican or a special prosecutor. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating. But let's say, for argument's sake, benefit of the doubt, all right, whatever. The attorney general, she comes in, new people come in, they want their own people, fine. You fire the special prosecutor, you don't fire the entire team. I was told that they barely debriefed. They barely even got a debrief from the team. So you are tossing out 3 years of investigation. You can't replace that institutional knowledge of who all the players are, of where all the bodies are buried. So they got rid of them and then, quote unquote, started over. But the problem is, what you started over with is weaker than what the original team had. And, you know, I just don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but based on what I have found and reported, there is more than a misdemeanor for the governor. There is at least misconduct in office. That's what they found. Misconduct in office, including neglect of duty. We're not even getting to the federal case. He perjured himself in front of Congress, but just the state of Michigan. There's involuntary manslaughter. There's other statutes in terms of negligence. And then we have to go to, again, his top advisor, his right-hand man, who went around Flint saying, we're best friends. I'm here on behalf of the governor. Richard Baird hired Governor Snyder, gave him his first job out of college. They're like that. How is it that this man is going around offering payoffs to sick Flint residents? How is it that this man is going around extorting people? That's what they charged him with, extortion. How is it that this man, I found out through my reporting, he was basically trying to line up environmental department officials, health department officials who were being subpoenaed by the prosecution for interviews, get them in a room and give them a story. That's obstruction of justice. You can't try to dictate what defendants are going to tell a criminal investigation. He was doing that. He was basically giving them their message to go and basically make stuff up under oath. How is it that you can find that the governor's proxy, who said, I am here on behalf of Governor Snyder, he said that countless meetings. He said that in one meeting where he offered a payoff to a sick Flint resident. She's on the record. But there's no tie to the governor. Either his right-hand man is the most renegade cowboy who just does whatever he wants without anyone knowing, or he was doing it on behalf of the governor. And, you know, it's a shame, really, because honestly, to me, this is not just about Flint, Michigan. It's not just about water. It's about, do we live in a country or do we live in a multi-trillion-dollar corporate conglomerate? Because this is how corporations act, not governments. This is corporations like DuPont and Dow Chemical and Monsanto. They poison people. They pay, you know, pennies, whatever, their settlements, and then they move on and no one goes to jail. But technically, if a government poisons people, you would think there's going to be some accountability, but we're not seeing that. And everything, you know, I really encourage people. I know some people don't like The Intercept, whatever. Read the story. That, you know, it ain't easy to get the truth published anywhere. So I'm happy The Intercept published it. If you read these phone calls, if you read the phone calls in the context of what else was going on when these calls happened, if you read the governor's briefing that mentioned Legionella in Flint 16 months earlier than he said he knew about it, if you read the other things in the story, you don't need to be a lawyer to know there's more than a misdemeanor there. And I wish I had the answer, Graham, why they are only charging with a misdemeanor. Maybe they're going for the easy route, what they think they definitely can convict. But at least from my reporting, I have airtight sourcing that the original investigation felt they had come to the decision to charge the governor with misconduct in office, which is a felony. It can be charged as a misdemeanor, but they were going for a felony, 5-year felony, negligence, willful neglect of duty, which is a year misdemeanor. So that would have been 6 years if you get him on both. And they were going for involuntary manslaughter. And I will say, bottom line, it's the Republican was the governor, but the current governor is a Democrat. And let's just drop the veil. The Democratic Attorney General, she ain't doing these things without the governor knowing. The Attorney General, and the governor, they're supposed to be independent. That's not how it works anywhere. They could tell you that's how it works. The sitting governor, I mean, she's not involved. I want to, fairness to her. There was a kidnapping plot, an assassination plot against her. I get she's been busy with COVID and things. Like, I want to be fair, but she knows what's going on. And it's just disgusting. And you know what? Honestly, it's insulting. Flint is a majority Black and brown city, but there's a lot of poor white people too. And it is insulting when President Obama goes in there 2 days before this recent election, pretends like, yeah, things are improving there. He didn't send the Army Corps of Engineers in to dig up those pipes. He could have declared a federal disaster. He didn't. He declared a federal emergency, which is different. So let me tell you, if this happened in Beverly Hills, Wilshire Avenue or whatever,
the Hamptons.
A, it wouldn't have happened, but B, if it did, you better believe the National Guard would be in and it would be fixed in 6 weeks, not 6 years.
Oh yeah. I mean, 6 weeks on the outset. I mean, that would have been like, they would have, choppered in spring water from the goddamn Swiss Alps if that happened in Beverly Hills, man. I have so many questions here. First of all, just to clarify, is not the Attorney General appointed by the governor?
No, Attorney General's elected.
Attorney General's elected. Okay. But the people of Michigan elected a Democrat governor and a Democrat Attorney General in the same election cycle, correct?
Yeah. And the Attorney General, by the way, one of her cornerstones was justice for Flint, shitting on the original investigation. And by the way, like, I'm not carrying water for the original investigation. I don't have a horse. I'm just following the facts. I've been to Flint many, many times, too many, because I never see my wife anymore. All I'm doing is Flint. And I could tell you, based on what I have seen, and I have obtained a lot of documents that I shouldn't have. I obtained them legally, by the way. I will tell you, this was a damn good original investigation. I mean, they had the goods, not only on Snyder, but his top people. One has to ask today, why were there no charges against Snyder's chief of staff, who was kind of the middleman for all this? He knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she, I don't know. And I will say, she's been on CNN quite a bit. She's gotten a lot of airtime on CNN, on MSNBC, fighting the fight against Trump. Even long before, by the way, the Capitol attacks, the Michigan Attorney General, fighting the fight against Trump. Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor, she basically, might as well get a green room to live in at MSNBC and CNN during COVID. I'm not saying that governors and attorney generals can't do media, but it's very clear to me they both. I mean, if not for George Floyd, Governor Gretchen Whitmer might have been the vice presidential pick. Joe Biden, he was very fond of her, I hear. So it was between Whitmer and Amy Klobuchar before George Floyd. So, I think there are political ambitions here. And to me, and I don't pretend to be neutral in this. I've sat on porches with children that can no longer recite the alphabet. I have sat with people that are dying. And I don't know how the chief executive of a state can preside over this, how there could be extremely suspicious series of phone calls between the governor, his chief of staff, and the health director, how there can be a briefing addressed to the governor, which, by the way, in my story, Graham, this briefing that was titled Governor's Briefings from October 2014 that mentioned Legionella, which Snyder claims he didn't know about till a year and a half later. The investigators presented this briefing to the head of the health department when they interviewed him. He broke down. He broke down on the verge of tears when he saw this briefing. It was described to me, he froze and then he broke down because he had seen that before and he knew, yeah, they got it. So the evidence is there, and I think they should really at some point have to explain themselves. And moving it forward, listen, this is a state of Michigan investigation, but Rick Snyder also perjured himself in front of Congress, Joe Biden said a lot of big words about restoring the soul of the nation and all these different things. Well, he's got the White House, he's got the Senate now, he's got the House, and
well,
the Republican governor perjured himself in front of Congress. That's a federal crime. So Joe Biden and his Department of Justice and his Oversight Committee, they could certainly do something now.
Well, that's what I want to talk about, and because, well, that's, I mean, look, I don't want to hear any more fucking complaining from the liberals. Like you've got Trump's gone. He's going to be gone next week, barring whatever chaos happens next week. But next week, after the 20th, the Democrats have the House, the Congress, and the Senate. I don't want to hear any excuses. You can't blame the Republicans and Trump and Russia and Jill Stein and Bern Bros and Susan Sarandon, whatever nonsense you want to complain about. Like, you have it. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear, oh, we got to wait till the midterms. We got to wait for this and wait for that. No, you have all the power. Do it. So that's my question to you is there any talk or any inclination of a federal investigation, since the state of Michigan is so clearly not doing their job?
I don't want to pretend that I had a one-on-one pipeline with them. I've never spoken with Elijah Cummings before he died, but I do know from many, many sources that Elijah Cummings, when he was still alive and was the oversight chairman, was trying to get Snyder back in because he knew he lied. But the Republicans still controlled the Senate, so he couldn't do it. Couldn't get it done. Right now, it's Carolyn Maloney, who is another, frankly, I'll let other people characterize her. But she's the Oversight Committee chairman. She was just very narrowly reelected. She's been a corporate Democrat forever. She's from New York. She has the power right now. She's not precluded from dragging Rick Snyder back to. And by the way, he was just charged with a crime. Even though it's a parking ticket, it was a crime. So wouldn't you think, hey, the state of Michigan is charging him. Let's bring him back and ask him some follow-up questions. Hey, there's new reporting that indicates we want to ask him about these calls. We want to ask him about this briefing when you told us you knew about this a year and a half later. I haven't heard anything. I mean, granted, there's impeachment and all these things, but I haven't heard anything from the Democrats on this. And unfortunately, they are going to gaslight. They are going to say, no. I mean, I'm already hearing it. Well, we have to undo Trump's damage domestically and foreign, abroad. There's so much to unwind. We can't do big things. We got to, first undo the damage. First of all, Biden could undo the damage Trump did like that through executive action. You could restore all the clean air, clean water, drilling, all that. Executive action done.
That should be day one, like day one.
Right.
Oh, that's the thing. Oh, we got to undo all this. Okay, great. There's day one. Undo. Okay, now it's done. It's like Trump's gone. You undid all of his nonsense. Now what? Like, it doesn't take months for executive orders. They can be written out in an hour. I mean, literally, like, his transition team should have everything drafted right now. So, like, his hand comes off the Bible. Oh, they hug and kiss and take some photos, and then sits his old ass down and just writes this and gets this done.
Well, there's also another element here as to my working theory, an educated working theory, because I've dedicated the last 5 years to the Flint water crisis story. I think there's a financial incentive not to do anything either. And I'll tell you why. This wasn't in my story because I literally had to rush this out because charges were going out. So the reason that Flint was on the Flint River in the first place was because of a financial deal that basically was a privatization scheme. They were building a brand new water pipeline. It was called the KWA pipeline. People in Michigan know what I'm talking about. And essentially the KWA pipeline they were building it on the same exact pathway of the existing Detroit water pipeline that Flint had gotten its water from since the 60s. They never had a problem getting water from Detroit. Yeah, they complained Detroit kept hiking rates and all this stuff. But essentially, city of Flint officials and some state officials, they wanted to build this new pipeline. This new pipeline was going to deliver raw water, whereas Detroit's water pipeline was delivering treated water. The difference is, you know what you need? You know what people use raw water for, Graham? Fracking. They use raw water for things like fracking. They use raw water for things like meat packing. They use raw water for things like automaking, for sugar beet farming, raw water. And Rick Snyder wanted to frack, not wanted to, he did, frack the hell out of Michigan, particularly Western Michigan. So they were building this brand new pipeline, but they didn't have all the money they needed to construct it. So Genesee County, which Flint is part of Genesee County, they needed to get another city on the pipeline so that another city could borrow money. So essentially, a allegedly fraudulent deal was struck so that Flint, a basically bankrupt city, it wasn't officially bankrupt, but close, Flint was legally not able to borrow any more money in 2014. It had reached its debt limit. So there was it was basically a consent order issued that gave Flint an exception to borrow $85 million to get on this pipeline. So bottom line, there was a allegedly fraudulent deal so that Flint could borrow money to join this water pipeline. While that water pipeline was being constructed, instead of just keeping Flint on Detroit's water system until that new pipeline was built, they said, oh, let's try to save money. We'll put them on the Flint River. So that's why Flint was on the Flint River in the first place, because of this totally unnecessary pipeline that essentially was going to be used. They build it as, oh, this new pipeline, we're not getting water from Detroit anymore. So now the rates will be cheaper for Flint residents because we're going to have a regional pipeline system. Well, that never happened. Detroit, by the way, before Flint went on the Flint River, Graham, Detroit offered to cut its rate in half, 50%, to keep Flint, because Flint was its biggest water customer. Detroit said, if you stay with us, we're cutting your rates in half. This would pose, they did the math, you would be saving 20% over this other pipeline if you stay with Detroit. They said, no, we're going to go with this new pipeline. Why? Because they wanted this brand new water pipeline, A, for fracking, B, there was money to be had, Graham. You know who did the bond deal for this pipeline? JP Morgan, Wells Fargo. And by the way, there was the
same banks, by the way, that had money in Dakota Access Pipeline.
Yep. By the way, there's a whole lot of real estate developers making money because they were using the pipeline route was making the land more valuable. So it's unbelievably corrupt, the whole thing. Frankly, to me, the most frustrating part, my partner, Jen, who worked on the story with me, she's got COVID, by the way. She's had it for 2 months, thanks to that fucking asshole, Rudy Giuliani, and that maskless lunatic, Sidney Powell, and Rudy Giuliani. Jen went to cover his crazy press conference in November. They wouldn't wear masks. It was in a very tight space in the RNC building in DC. She is now one of the quote unquote long haulers. Every morning she's sending me her thermometer. She still has a low grade fever 2 months later. Brain fog, all these things. So Jen worked on this story with me through these symptoms. But Jen has literally sent our story. She's probably sent out 300 emails since yesterday to media. I think 2 picked it up. How do you report on the governor being charged without reporting that The Intercept, which is it's pretty well known, just broke that he was engaged in a cover-up? I mean, it's mind-boggling. So to me, I could do 3 hours on the media and the corporate media. That's why I created Status Coup, because the media in this country is complicit in the corruption. They're part of the corruption. Yeah. They allow it to happen. And it's the local media that's toxic, and the national media. CNN literally did 40. I saw them do 40 seconds this morning. And it's exactly like you said. They billed it as justice. The governor's being charged.
Yeah, case closed. We got it. Yay, we won. They do that with all these, any sort of massive egregious, when the ruling class commits an egregious crime, somebody gets busted and it's just like, oh, case closed. Epstein is the greatest case. We got him. We got Julian Mack. We got done. wait a minute, let's look at their files. Let's talk about why. Wait a minute, who are all these people? They wheeled out cartloads of stuff out of Epstein's home in his penthouse in New York City. Where's all that information? Case closed. Got it. Same thing with Snyder. We got him. Wait a minute. Let's go through the investigation, like you said, that the Attorney General did. The original investigation. Why aren't we talking about that? No, 40 seconds. And then CNN can say, yeah, we talked about it. We covered that case. We covered it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood and rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, where you can support the show. Also, I have a Bitcoin wallet, a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and an Ethereum wallet in the show notes. We're taking cryptocurrency. I have a Coinbase affiliation link. We're going to be getting on some other exchanges. So that's how you support the show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. YouTube is unsubscribing us at an alarming rate. I have a PayPal button at GrahamElwood.com. I even have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. There's a lot of ways to support our show. We are getting crushed by YouTube. We've dipped under 73,000 subscribers because of YouTube. Thanks for supporting what we do.